Out.
I'll start with higher education, and there are references on page 156 and 157 in the outputs and the objectives relating to higher education functions. I think the Minister said there's an advisor here with that particular in mind. Can the Deputy Premier provide an update on the specific budget and FTE count for the higher education functions within her department?
Four positions.
And the budget going forward?
So when you say the budget, do you mean still for the FTE count or the amount of money that's being spent?
The amount of money, I assume that those four are an FTE.
That they'll be steady, that's right. So the 24-25 budget for the higher and international education program is $16,468,000. The reason it is significantly higher than the previous year's budget is that for 3 years we hold the $10 million grants for each of 3 years to go to the new university for marketing for international students. So last year's was $6.794 million.
So can I just confirm $6.7 million once you've taken out the $10 million that's going to be given to the new university for its international student attraction post? $6 million strikes me as rather high for 4 FTE. What are the other outcomes or outputs from that funding?
So in addition to paying for the staff, we have $500,000 from in 23-24, dropping to $250,000 for the following 2 years for the multicultural tertiary courses, which is an election commitment. We have the additional funding for 3 years of $2 million each year, 23-24 through to the end of 25-26, to supplement what Study Adelaide is able to spend for attracting international students. And then Study Adelaide itself has $2.5 million for each year ongoing. There's also the scholarships for the teaching profession, which again was an election commitment, and some money for what was the University Merger Commission that has turned into the support for the independent expert advisor.
Okay, that was going to be my next question. So do I understand correctly that $1 million that was for 1 million or 2 million? The funding that was for the Universities Commission has been retained but for this new purpose, is that correct? And is it retained in its entirety?
I don't think it's been retained in its entirety. I think what we did was return to the central budget the original election commitment when matters proceeded faster than anticipated, and then have been given an allocation to pay for the international the independent expert. Can you tell it's now my fourth in a row? I'm starting to slow down.
It's my first, so I'm just getting warmed up.
Great.
Can I clarify then, can you identify the quantum of funds and the period of time that's been allocated for that expert advisor?
So we've structured this as a base contract for 12 months with an option to extend for a further 6 months, and we have the funding for that, which is for the total contract term of 18 months, would be $576,000.
Again, particularly in relation to the objective listed on page 157, which is developing and implementing policies and programs and undertaking strategic engagement with education providers to build a progressive higher and international education sector. Does the Deputy Premier have a role under that objective in working with universities for the 3-year-old preschool new degree that is a 3-year degree for 0 to 5 as opposed to the standard 4-year degree for 0 to 8? It's been announced by other ministers, I appreciate, but given this objective and the minister's role in working with universities, has she had any involvement with that role?
I haven't had any operational connection to it. Obviously, that was one of the recommendations that came from the Royal Commission into having 3-year-old preschool, and has been agreed by Cabinet, so my involvement is there evidently. I'm not sure that the universities need me to be involved in their structuring of that option, but I'm always happy to have a conversation with them.
Is the Minister aware of whether any of the 3 South Australian major universities that include teaching degrees are pursuing the 0 to 5 degree?
The department has been working on the workforce strategy for 3-year-old preschool with the Department for Education, but has yet to engage with universities about their offerings.
Has the Minister received advice from the universities more broadly about teaching degrees and numbers of applications, enrolments in those teaching degrees, the standard ones, I guess, that they have? So we're aware that the universities are generally under cap across their capacity to enrol, which is troubling but unsurprising when there's very low unemployment. People are out working. There are also challenges, of course, with cost of living and contemplation of taking on debt. However, we are yet to engage fully with universities on how they are going to attract enough teaching students to fulfil the aspirations of the teaching workforce required across our ambitious policies for education. We have had the specific focus of the scholarships that were offered as part of the election commitments, and understand that they have been taken up and been very popular. What we want to do in a period of time, maybe a couple of years, is to see how that's translated into numbers in those particular areas that we're interested in, recognising that that was about the diversity of the teaching workforce as opposed to simply the sheer number, which is now becoming more of a pressing workforce question. Thank you. I have a couple more questions on this specific budget line, but I do actually have some questions on scholarships as well, which I'm sure you'll appreciate the opportunity to talk more about. So when it comes to the 3-year 0 to 5 degree, last year we talked about the government's commitment to having a minimum ATAR scores apply to teachers. I'm wondering whether the government selection commitment of minimum ATAR scores applies to the 3-year 0 to 5 degree as well. Will that be something you are seeking from the universities?
That was a view about the quality of teaching at the input stage. It is an election policy, it is a policy of the government, and therefore I would expect it to be maintained for the 3 years as well. I personally think that the ATAR score is but one indicator of how well someone's going to do, but I recognise that people need to have confidence in the teaching profession, and that's why there's often been discussions about the minimum ATAR. The 3 universities have indicated that they haven't had challenges with the minimum ATAR for the rest of their teaching. Last time I had a conversation, which would have been a year ago. But so no one has presented to us a challenge with that for a shorter degree, should the universities decide to engage in that.
I don't disagree with anything you said, but it was the government's election commitment.
And I don't resile in any way from that being a government policy, just trying to give it a wider context.
The last one on this line, does the government anticipate that Landtite requirements, literacy and numeracy testing for initial teacher education requirements will be applied to allow for graduates of the 0 to 5 degree as it is for the 0 to 8 degree?
So that test is a federal test that was applied. I think it's an open question whether it would be applied. It's also an open question how useful it is.
Can I move to page 157? And the highlights include support the passage of legislation to create the new Adelaide University. Can the Minister provide an update on how that merger process is going? Feel free to list highlights, but also any concerns that have been raised.
Have you got a briefing on that? So in the broad, it's proceeding well. It's hitting the marks that were expected. Getting the TEXA and then the CRICOS registration was a very significant milestone. It sounds like a simple matter when you're outside it, but I am assured that it was a complex matter. These institutions have not been used to certifying a brand new university being created from 2 others. And so they had to go through the process not only of what the institution would look like, but also the transitional provisions in its creation, the transitional council and so on. And TEXA needed to assure itself that this was a soundly governed institution, and they've received, without qualification, 7 years, and that's absolutely crucial. They are now, of course, working through all of the detail of what it means to have a single institution at the stage of what kind of computer systems can be integrated simply and which will take longer to integrate, the revision of the curriculum, the proposition that there will be a trimester approach rather than a semester approach. Those changes are within the 3 institutions, if you like, but the 2 existing universities progressing. There is a site on North Terrace that is where all of the change people are housed, so that they're working together.
It's a technical
and
term.
There's that's recently went on a tour of it, meeting with the Transition Council to hear how they believe things are progressing. So there are a number of signs of movement proceeding. That shouldn't indicate in any way that this is a simple matter, and nor that it's almost done. There is a great deal of complexity involved in bringing 2 significant and quite different in many ways institutions together, and the organisation of that new university and then the cultural fit are 2 elements that are being worked on that I think probably be the most complex. People have seen that the university went out with questions about where do you think these different elements of the university ought to fit, how do we group them up? And they've now, I think, received all of that feedback. There was what I think was an alarmist reaction that possibly the Elder Conservatorium would not be in the new institution. I'm assured that that is far from being the case, that of course the Elder Conservatorium is essential to the future of South Australia and would not be abandoned. It's merely a question of what is the construction around that and all the other elements of the university. And people will have strong views. There'll also be a process before too long of identifying who will be the leaders underneath the Vice-Chancellors, soon then to be Vice-Chancellor, but the next layer, there'll be a process of selecting those people for the new institution. So the universities both are dealing with their own institutions functioning, but also the creation of the new institution. It's stretching them. They have resourced themselves to do that, but I in no way want to be complacent or to minimise the very significant work that needs to be undertaken. And doubtless there will at times be things that don't go as well as leadership would like them to. That hasn't occurred yet, but doubtless that is going to be a feature because humans are fallible. But every effort has been made by the Transition Council and by the leaders, the two Vice-Chancellors who work to create the new university, to plan this out and to resource it appropriately, and thus far I think it's gone as well as one could have expected.
In the, I think it was the MOAA or MOU between the government and the universities, there was a clause that provided for a loan facility from the government to the universities if further funding was potentially and unexpectedly required. In the Minister's discussions with them and the tour that she recently had, has there been any suggestion that that's likely to be called upon?
No, that's not been raised at all with me, and I've just confirmed nor with my Chief Advisor here.
Good news. Has the methodology for providing Flinders University with funds for its new equity fund been resolved? And if so, can you tell us how that's going to work?
And I'm certainly not one for, I'm not talking about it because it's not my budget line. It does actually sit with Treasury and the Treasurer. I don't have an immediate update for you. So they're working, as I understand it, on the guidelines right now.
Can I ask, from a policy point of view then, within the objective on page 158, does the government remain resolved not to provide an equivalent research fund for Flinders University as Adelaide is being provided?
That is the current position, that's right. Now Flinders, as a good organisation that advocates for itself, will no doubt come back to future budgets with propositions, but that is not something that is being contemplated. What's important in ensuring fairness to the remaining institution, Flinders University, as they like to say, soon to be the oldest university in South Australia, that they are not going through the expense and complexity of a merger process. So while we need to ensure that their students are not disadvantaged, and I think that Colin Sterling made a very powerful case at the committee that the member participated in considering what it means to have a merged institution between two of the universities, made a very powerful case that if you're going to have a way of supporting disadvantaged students in courses that they've chosen to do at the new university, then what if those same disadvantaged students were to actually want to go to Flinders University and do their courses? And so that was responded to by the government. We've recognised that that would have been unfair. The research funding is a different proposition because the university is going through, the Adelaide University is going through immense expense associated with creating this new institution, and we have wanted to recognise and support that in order to help it be successful. That none of what I've said though precludes Flinders continuing to make advocacy for various options. For example, they were the university that had the election commitment from us coming into government this time to support Line Zero at Tonsley. There wasn't an equivalent allocation made to either of the other two universities. We've never, in the time that I've been involved, seen that what we do for one university we must do for the other automatically. It's always been on a case-by-case basis of what is merited and what proposition is before us. So we will continue to operate in that way, and Flinders being a very strong institution and growing stronger, I'm sure will make good cases in the future.
In relation to the Minister's discussions with the leadership of the University of South Australia and the new university, has she got any update on the potential timeline for the closure of the McGill campus?
That there was a 10-year lease provided to the University of South Australia to stay there, and my understanding is that they've given no indication that they want to exit earlier, although it is their right to, and in fact I believe there was a statement made last week that indicated that they have no plans at this stage to change what is being offered in the near future. But I haven't seen that statement myself, so I don't want to mislead accidentally through paraphrasing what I've been told. I missed that statement last week, and you may have seen it. But the 10-year lease is the legal instrument we have.
I think the car parking is based on the other side of the road where there's a 3-year lease, but I appreciate the Minister is...
Okay, so I will just quote properly, which, although reported to in Daily, a spokesperson said in a statement, UniSA has not changed its current plans to maintain its teaching and research presence at the McGill campus as previously indicated. We've not commenced any planning in regard to relocating McGill programs, nor is this scheduled to commence in the short term.
Some questions on, I think it's the same objective that I've quoted before, page 157, but on a slightly different line, particularly to do with international students. And then I'm guessing the member for Chaffey may well pick up the baton not long after. No, you're all good? Okay, we'll go to the member for Morphett next. But well, there are two sets of questions. Firstly, in relation to the federal government's budget announcement, and separately but related in relation to the operation of the Department for Home Affairs on not providing visas. So feel free to be expansive in your answer if you want to cover off on both issues. But let's start with a straightforward question. Has the Minister yet secured any assurances from the Commonwealth that they will provide exemptions for our South Australian universities when it comes to the new caps on international student numbers?
I appreciate the line of questioning here because this is a matter that I have taken very seriously. I don't think that the right test is exemption. Generally, when one has a piece of legislation governing a sector, one doesn't just provide a blanket exemption for one state in law, particularly not when the proposition, if it is to be based on the merger, would presumably then be based temporarily while it goes through that process. So I don't think that's the right test. What we need to assure ourselves of is that the way in which the law is constructed and then the policy is operated underneath the law is one that our universities are not disadvantaged by. And from the beginning, there has been the right language from the federal government that the conditions that exist in South Australia wouldn't disadvantage South Australia with this law that's been tabled in federal parliament. However, because this is so important to our economy, I haven't just gone, oh, well, that's fine then, thank you for the reassurance. My view is that I need to advocate in every means before me to ensure that they understand what it is that's special and not entirely unique about South Australia, but certainly different from the experience on the eastern seaboard and Sydney and Melbourne specifically, that they understand why it is that we want to be assured that this will not negatively affect us. The fact of the debate does potentially affect the international student market for all of Australia. And the Commonwealth are aware of that. They know that people overseas are reading and wondering what the role of international students is in the future. That would be more worrying if it weren't the same sort of debate occurring in other English-speaking nations, such as Canada, so we're not competitively disadvantaged in that sense. But the reason I raise that is a fairly hasty conclusion to this period of what is it they're doing would be very useful, because I think the greatest risk to South Australia is not that the legislation will hurt us in itself, but that a sense of uncertainty might. For example, if what the Commonwealth is particularly concerned about, and of course is on our minds too, is that there is sufficient housing for international students so that they are not competing with domestic housing needs, then conversations with developers about student housing are much easier if there is certainty that international students are coming. And so the uncertainty is what in itself can cause a challenge for us. And that's why it is important, in my view, that a resolution is reached fairly quickly about what this mechanism will look like. Now, of course, there is a mechanism in federal parliament right now, but it's the top level capacity, the power to set a cap for an individual institution. What we need to be reassured of is that the way in which that mechanism would be used would not be to our disadvantage. Now, some illustrations of why we don't believe it should. We have at the moment about 10% vacancy rate in student accommodation, so we're not busting at the seams. However, we would like to build more in concert with developers, because of course we'd like to have more international students come over time. We want that housing, by the way, to be able to accommodate different kinds of international students, so postgraduates will tend to come with families and are not going to want to be in one room with one bed, but actually some family accommodation, so making sure that we can have those conversations. The percentage of international students at our institutions is significantly lower than you see in some of the Group of 8 in Sydney and Melbourne. One of these Sydney institutions, I think, is breaching 50% of their students, their total student body is international students. The university here that has the highest proportion is the University of Adelaide, being a Group of 8 institution and therefore more attractive to international students, and is hovering around 30%. The other two are much lower than that. Therefore, we are not in danger of losing what the federal government might characterise as social licence to have significant numbers of international students. The sooner that we're able to clearly articulate when they are talking about high proportions of international students that they don't mean South Australia would be good. In one of the many conversations I've had face-to-face with federal ministers recently, I spoke to Minister Claire O'Neill recently and gave a presentation about what we see to be our workforce challenges, including where international students fit into that. She indicated that her view was that South Australia would be the beneficiary of tightening up what occurs in Sydney and Melbourne, because students who wish to study in South Australia regardless are likely to be attracted to a larger Group of 8 in Adelaide University when it's created. That is possible. Any uncertainty, of course, makes people worry, but it is possible that we will be the net beneficiaries. What we need in order to make that be true is sufficient accommodation and also a capacity to market this new university as a Group of 8 university with greater capacity before it breaches a 30%-ish line. And that is helped by the additional funds we've provided to Study Adelaide and the additional funds directly to the new university. They will be put to good use, and in many ways, if you were of an optimistic cast of mind, you would say this is the perfect time, because there'll be the squeeze potentially on those universities interstate. We've set aside some additional money for marketing. We'll have this larger Group of 8 with the lower proportion that sits in the University of South Australia. The combined new uni will have a lower proportion, and we should be able to see advantage here. So this isn't all bad news for the institutions, but it is something that I think is of sufficient importance to South Australia. It was, after all, in 2023 our biggest single export sector. That I pay very careful attention to what's occurring.
I thank the Minister for the answer. Given the, and we've discussed it before, the expectation that for the university, the new Adelaide University, to fulfil its opportunities, it requires an extra 5,000 to 7,000 international students. And also, given Flinders has invested substantial funds in its new campus in the city, which has got a particular target for international students, the demand for South Australian universities to fulfil their potential requires, one imagines, approximately an extra 10,000 international students coming here. So when the Minister says that there's a 10% vacancy rate at the moment, How close is that to being sufficient to meet our needs here? And how much more accommodation do we need to build for international students specifically to keep us in the safe zone from being capped by the federal government?
Yes, so I won't do the maths here on what that percent vacancy rate translates into, but I will return to the point I made earlier that we do want more accommodation to be built under the aegis of the universities, which they do with relationships with developers who will invest if they're certain that there will be a market. And so this period of uncertainty is not helpful for that, but I fully expect it to come to an end before too long, because the federal government is acutely aware of not doing harm to the sincere endeavours in South Australia, but also elsewhere. While universities in Sydney may be full and straining with having sufficient accommodation, some of their regional centres, they are keen to be able to continue to grow. So it's not just that South Australia is special, although as the South Australian minister,
but we are.
We are, of course, and you know, far be it from me to say that we're not, but we're not unique. And so the case is made stronger by the fact that we're not operating alone. But as soon as the federal government is able to give a bit more of that clarity and certainty, which I fully expect to occur before too long, then that aids the universities in their conversations with developers. What the legislation will do is focus all universities' minds on ensuring that they are getting that pipeline of accommodation in order to avoid that trigger. And that is, in fact, a useful element of this legislation.
I referred earlier in this line of questioning to issues of visas not being granted in a timely fashion, or indeed in some areas at all, by the federal government for both higher education providers. I've heard from at least one university that's got this as an elevated issue at the moment. I suspect it's two of them, and also quite a lot from RTOs. Particularly those specialising in bringing in students that aren't from mainland China. Has the Minister had similar feedback, and if so, has she had a chance to talk to her federal counterparts about this issue?
Briefly, yes and yes. I've had feedback, of course, not only from the two universities, but also from RTOs. I attended a roundtable recently hosted by Study Adelaide, where we were able to talk with some of the other providers as well as the universities about the experience of visa approvals. There is a meeting of the migration ministers on Friday that I'll be attending, where I will again raise this with the ministers. It was a significant part of the discussion I've had both with Andrew Giles and with Claire O'Neill, and I think we will see some shift. Their view, and you know, far be it from me to speak on behalf of a federal minister, but my understanding is that the system that they have inherited does not function well. And I recall it being, in the early days of being minister in 2022, hearing from migration agents about how significant the backlog was and how much challenge that was presenting for skilled migration. So that was the system that Claire O'Neill has inherited and is trying to fix. And there is a pain at present for institutions like Flinders and University of South Australia and some RTOs, which I don't like and don't accept, but that I'm assured is a transitional period of pain, that it is not intended for this to continue for long. It is one of the great ironies that what we're dealing with is, on the one hand, both sides of politics, on the education side at the federal level saying please don't be so dependent on China because things can change, and the Home Affairs Agency finding Chinese visa applications easier and more straightforward to process, and some other nations that these institutions are turning to being regarded as being of greater risk. That is the challenge of operating internationally. It's not to say that the risk isn't real, but it is to say that institutions are doing their best to respond to the requirement or the request to diversify. So this is the mix that we're in at present. What I've done is not only raise the overall challenge that we're experiencing, but also making sure that the ministers and the minister's department Home Affairs well aware of specific cases that we're seeing where challenges seem to be refusals or delays seem to be inexplicable, and making requests that they be looked at. So we are doing what we can at the state government level to interact with our federal counterparts to make representation on behalf of South Australian institutions.
My last question on this line, but I understand that in 2022, after 2 years of pandemic and nobody coming into the country, Home Affairs had been drawn down to a husk of its former numbers as a direct result of the pandemic. Has your discussions with Minister O'Neill or Giles given you a sense of whether they are back up to full complement yet, or are they still struggling to recruit?
I haven't asked that question, so I couldn't speak on behalf of that government.
I've got some more on another issue.
The member for Morpeth.
Well, thank you. So just in case we've changed pages, so we're still the same budget paper though, volume 3, page 157, just looking at the highlights regarding entrepreneurship. Why has the Minister abolished the position of Chief Entrepreneur?
Yes, that was a decision that was made and with the very good will of Andrew Nunn, who was an excellent chief entrepreneur, to recognise that the evolution of the innovation ecosystem, I don't like using too many buzzwords, but it is one that is used with innovation, had reached a point where having a single chief entrepreneur, albeit with an advisory board, wasn't the best or only way to interact with those companies that are innovating and that are becoming startups and moving into the maturity scale. So what we proposed was that rather than having a single person have that title, we would have a process where we would be able to support through mentorship and other programs many companies to get the kind of support that they need at the particular point that they're at. And Andrew Nunn was very helpful in helping us construct that. So I'll just give some of the list, thank you, of the Innovation Leaders Network program. Some of the particular actions are the Business Acumen events, which is panel discussions. And I think Andrew Nunn featured in one of those early on, along with me. He's a very generous man. Boardroom lunch events, which is also about exchanging knowledge, experience and having different experts in different fields presenting. A leadership program, which is a structured capability program for leaders of growing innovative businesses, and also, as I mentioned, a mentorship program which connects entrepreneurs with expertise and guidance through conversations with more experienced founders. So those programs we felt were more fit for purpose in the current stage of innovation that has occurred in South Australia, and we felt that was a reasonable shift.
How much funding was allocated to the Office of the Chief Entrepreneur in 2023-24?
Just looking for the exact fund, but the exact amount, but we haven't taken that away. So the people who were working with the chief entrepreneur remain, and we've just refocused what it is they do and how they do it. But I'll see if we've got the figure. I'll take that on notice,
Yeah.
so I'm not wasting your time.
Thank you for that. If I could maybe, in anticipation, take the following on notice as well. How many FTEs were allocated to the Office of Chief Entrepreneur in 23-24? And if you don't have the information available, how much funding is allocated to the Office of Chief Entrepreneur in 2024-25?
So it's a team of 10 staff, and
10
they
staff,
have
good.
remained. So
10 FTEs?
Yes, it's FTEs rather than headcount. Yes, and the Office of the South Australian Chief Entrepreneur has essentially been renamed Innovation and Entrepreneurship Business Unit, but the same 10 people are working and they are running this Leaders Program, Innovation Leaders Program.
Okay, so I raced ahead too much. I was anticipating being on notice. So if I could just go back then, how much funding is allocated? I didn't write the entire name of the new department, but Innovation Entrepreneur for 24-25.
Yeah, so we don't, for some reason, haven't been able to identify that subset of our budget, so I'll take that on notice and provide that to you. But the staffing hasn't changed, so the budget hasn't changed.
Okay.
But I will provide that exact figure to you on notice rather than wasting your time by looking through
Thank you.
papers.
And is it funded across all 4 years of the forward estimates?
Yes, it is. There's no intention to discontinue this activity. It's an important activity, and Jim Wally and Andrew Nunn were excellent. It's just a different way of doing this, and with the support of those former chief entrepreneurs as well, which I'm very grateful for.
Okay, thank you. So if we move to page 160 of the same budget papers, just looking at the activity indicators, in particular the leveraged early stage private investment innovative companies. So in 2023 we had the ratio of 4:1, and then the 23-24 estimated result is dramatically down to 1:1. Why has there been such a reduction?
Okay. So the 23-24 estimated result of $7 million consists of private sector investments in 14 companies through Stream 2, which is Seed Start of the Research and Innovation Fund, and the South Australian Venture Capital Fund. The 23-24 estimated result is lower than the target of 20 million, as the value of private investment into early stage companies is influenced by the number of investments in a particular year, which can vary depending on deal flow and the timing of the capital raise. This has also affected the activity indicator, to which you're referring, changing the ratio, resulting in the result of 1:1 being significantly lower than the projection.
So just to get my understanding right, so I was going to follow up with some other questions around that, so we might retouch that. So that, yeah, the amounts have come down, and of course, because that ebbs and flows may be. I suppose what I'm trying to understand is, previously you had quite a significant leveraging of private investment, 4:1. So for every dollar government put in, you get $4 of private investment, which is, you know, what we want to see, just sort of enough to get them over the hurdle, but really they can take off. Now it seems to have gone 1:1. Is that because has the program changed in terms of its requirements? Like you talked about the seed grant program.
Okay. So, I think this is essentially about timing and possibly a shift in capacity for capital raising, given interest rates and other pressures in the economy. The 1:1 is the minimum required, so it's joint funded for Seed Start, and then we expect over time to see the capital raising, seeing that private investment going up. And at this stage, we haven't seen that for this estimated result. That may change. In 22-23, actual of 51 million, which translated into the 4:1, is significantly higher than both the target and the estimated result due to a number of the venture fund portfolio companies completing significant capital raisings in 22-23. So they may not have started them then, but they landed then, including Ferranova of 4.68 million, Lumery at 7.84, Fivecast at 24.84, and Biome Bank 9.7. So it could be, in retrospect, that we will see a bumper year in a couple of years. That is the result of. But I say that cautiously, given that the economic times that we're in now, with the squeeze on interest rates, may have also resulted in that not achieving that degree of capital raising. We will see.
Thank you. Thank you for that answer. You may have answered this before, but I'm not sure. So you said there's actually been, in terms of your performance indicators, indicated there was $7 million from early stage companies now at a ratio of 1:1. I'm assuming then the funding provided in 23-24 was around 7 million. I don't know if you're able to. Did you say that before? I'm not sure. I apologise if you did, but if you maybe could provide the amount of funding, and I appreciate the breakdown in recipients. I think you said there were 14. If you're able to provide a detailed list and the amounts provided, that would be much appreciated.
Investment is a combination of Seed Start and the Venture Capital Fund, and was 7.429 million. And if I read those, are they the Seed Start actuals? Yep. And potentials. Yep. From Venture Capital. Okay. So the Venture Capital, which is fund, which is 4.973 million, went to Sionex and to Biome Bank. And then for Seed Start, we've got Maxim Skate, Global Movement, Frigid Solutions, Flux Robotics, I should have brought my glasses, sorry, Sequential, and Organ Transport, trading as Vital Organ Technologies.
Thank you very much. So then, if I look at going forward, as you said, you have touched on the 24-25 targets. So the projection in terms of the leveraged amount is 2-1, with the aim then to get private investment of $10 million. So I'm inferring then that you're expecting around $5 million of funding out of the seed grant program or the venture capital to then leverage that 2-1. So why is there a reduction then in the amount of grant being allocated from 23-24 to 24-25?
I'm just being advised it might be most useful to talk about the RIF, the Research Innovation Fund, from which comes Seed Start, which is stream 2 of that, and then stream 1 is larger efforts such as a CRC. And so we don't have a specific amount each year that we say this must be what Seed Start has. What we have is the RIF. And if I look back in 21-22 actual, that was $6.8 million. And what we have at present is just a whisker under $11 million each year going through to the forwards. So that amount is not declining and has in fact gone up since a couple of years ago. But how we choose the balance of how we invest it is determined by people who understand what's happening in the economy and see opportunities for the maximum benefit. So it may be that a larger investment in a research facility is of greater value to small businesses than Seed Start, and so we might tip the balance. And other times we might see that we want to put more into Seed Start. So that will vary based on what's before us and how the economy is tracking.
Okay, no, thank you for that. Thank you for that answer. The same page, looking just at the same activity indicators, but now looking at workspaces available at lot 14. So 22-23 had 210. The estimated results 180 for this financial year, and then the projection going forwards 180. So it's about a 15% reduction. So why has there been a reduction in numbers, and what's the minister doing to regrow this number back to 210?
Okay, this is not a decline, really. So 30 places were in the McEwen building. They are still existing as places, but they've been reallocated into the SmartSat, CRC and Defence Innovation. So we're still using startup places, it's just not attached to that hub at Lot 14.
Okay.
And there's a level of complexity, so people sometimes share, different companies will share the same desk, so a place might service more people, more companies than at some times than at others. So right now, as of 1st of June, there are 184 residents across 55 companies in Stone and Chalk, just for your information.
Okay, so I can take from that because I've got my Defence and Space Industries
Yes.
hat as well, then I can go speaking to your counterpart just around, is it the Defence and Space landing pad where those workstations are, or SmartSat CRC, is that where I'd find them? Just to make sure that they're...
It's a combination of both, but we could take on notice so that you've got clarity about where they are.
Appreciate that, great. And just also, if I look through at the number of skill nominations made by South Australia, so 8,800, 22-23, 2,300, 23-24. Now, it seems like there's a caveat there around numbers not being available from the Commonwealth. Just yet, have those come through yet? And if so, are you able to provide them? Or at least give maybe an indication of where that's at? Are you likely to get near that 8,800 number? Unless this is a disaster number.
So the Commonwealth Government, we wanted more. The Commonwealth Government gave us 2,300 for this most recent year, just about to finish. We've applied for next year but haven't yet heard how many we'll be getting. I don't know if that will come out before the Migration Ministers' Roundtable on Friday, or if that will be a topic of discussion on Friday of what are our places looking like. It's an interesting dynamic that all of the state governments appreciate the role that skilled migration plays in filling skills shortages that are necessary to be filled for our economy, but all are also dealing with the challenge of housing shortage. And so it's a fine judged matter for the federal government.
Okay, so from what I can take it does seem like it's a real reduction. It's not like
it was a real reduction.
There's going to be something coming. So I mean,
It was a real reduction last year, yes.
Right, so it then puts into place, okay, so how do we go forward in terms of, we're looking to make up a shortfall of nurses, police, housing, construction, other frontline workers, chefs, it's been suggested to me as well. So what is the government then looking to do in its place when there's these very real shortages? We've seen housing supply.
Indeed, so it was a real shortage that was commensurate with a drop across all states. So South Australia wasn't singled out. All states got a small percentage of what they had asked for and what they'd had previously. The challenge is, first of all, what matters most of all is that we train our people into the areas that have got jobs attached to them. And secondly, that we make a good case for prioritising those skills that we desperately need. For example, we recently asked, and it was agreed to, that Andrew Giles added construction to the list for the DARMAs so that we're able to get people through a DARMA to work in construction because it's very hard to get housing if you don't have enough people building the housing. So that's an example of an intervention that we made where we said, when we're updating the Dharma, can we add this qualification? And the Commonwealth Government said yes. So that helps. So this is the kind of work where it's not just about the rhetorical, we need more skilled places, but let's talk about where specifically you can help us, federal government, and we've seen some movement where that's been helpful to us.
Thank you. Page 158 on grants and subsidies. Going back to the scholarships we were talking about before, maybe I can roll up a few questions in one long question and answer what you can and take on notice what you can't. So last year there were going to be 30 scholarships at Adelaide, 35 at Flinders and UniSA. So I'm wondering if the Minister could confirm that that has continued this year, and particularly for last year and this year, if possible, how many scholarships in each of the categories have been offered, noting that there were 4 or 5 different categories for each of those scholarships. I'm also wondering whether the program will change with the creation of the new university, noting the equity funds that are being provided for Flinders Uni and Adelaide Uni.
Yes, we will work through what it means to work with 2 universities, not 3. What I have for the 23 academic year is Flinders University 15, High ATAR 9, First Nations 1, Women in STEM 5, Men in Teaching 0, but the Flinders University numbers are low because they only awarded scholarship in semester 2. University of South Australia 34, High ATAR 18, First Nations 2, Women in STEM 3, Men in Primary School Teaching 11, and the University of Adelaide 24, High ATAR 14, First Nations 2, Women in STEM 8.
Is there any analysis being done on the effectiveness of this program to identify, for example, whether it's attracting new people who weren't already going to be doing these courses, and for how long is this program funded? Is it ongoing or does it have an end point?
Yeah, it was treated, as were most election commitments, as a term, and then a decision can be made about whether that's something that could be started again. We are interested in that analysis, and I'd probably counsel that we should have that analysis before we make a determination about continuing scholarship programs.
Will that analysis be conducted by this department?
That's the last question.
It will come to me as the Minister, whoever conducts it. Yep.
Okay. The allotted time having expired, I declare the examination of the Department for Industry, Innovation and Science and Higher Education complete. The proposed payments are referred to Committee B for further examination. Thank you to the Minister, Shadow Ministers and Advisors for your attendance today. And I call on the member for Waite.
I move that the committee do now adjourn until tomorrow at 9 a.m.
Is that seconded? That's seconded. I'll put that. All those in favour say aye, those against say no. I call it for the ayes. The committee stands adjourned until 9 a.m. tomorrow. And I can just let the committee know, committee members know that in the ratings war, we blitzed Committee B today again.